Here's stuff you'll need to know about the things I'm saying. Go ahead and Google them before I go into this. Inheritance, generics in programming, linked lists, referencing in programming. So, anyway, we need to make a grid. The combat system requires it. That's where enemies are going to be placed. But grids would be boring if they were the same every battle. So we figured that the best way to handle this would be to make it so that you could make a text file, feed it into a converter method, then convert that into a grid. So we read it in line by line, store those lines of text as strings, then read those character by character to generate the grid. Generating the grid, in this case, basically means we want to convert those chars into meaningful grid tile objects. Why? Because those grid tiles hold enemies, effects that they do to things standing on them, references to nearby tiles. They're useful. Speaking of references to other tiles, these things need to be connected, much like a linked list, but with 4 nodes for east, west, north, and south. Now, you might ask, why do this? I mean, we could just use the characters which were already stored in an array to have an n by n size grid of tiles and just refer to ye godly array to find where anything is. But that makes calculations into actual calculations. We're programmers, not mathematicians, and determining where things are in a non-relative sense sounds like work. Basically, if we have an enemy on the grid, we want to be able to ask that enemy what tile they're on, then just be able to grab nearby grid tiles without doing any math or pulling up coordinates. So that means we connect references to other grid tiles, link them all together, so we know what's nearby. The problem with doing this is that grid tiles have child types with special properties. Say the tile is on fire. Now it's a fire tile, or something. We want to make a method within gridTile, the parent, that allows us to make a new instance of a fire tile. That way we aren't trying to connect the same fire tile to each grid tile over and over. That sounds like a catastrophe of non-Euclidean movement. But for those that play around with inheritance, well, you know, the grid tile doesn't really know anything about its children, or that they even exist. So I did some searching around, and we're going to try implementing the curiously repeating template pattern. What does that mean? Well, basically, we're using it here to reference a child from a parent. To do this, grid tiles need to be turned into grid tiles with a reference to a generic t, which is to say that we've defined a generic that is used within grid tile. Then, when we go and make the child object, our fire tile, we go and make it a child of grid tile, with the generic set as fire tile. But what does this do for us? Well, it means that within the grid tile with a reference to the generic t, we can return the generic within a method. So, since the fire tile is the generic because of inheritance, the child returns a type of itself because the generic is converted from t. Estimated time to solve this problem was about a day. I mean, assuming this is the solution. If it doesn't work, I suppose you'll be hearing from me. Reed out.